which, I mean, I'm like the only iOS guy here, and then we've got like 4, I guess. I think there's 3 in Phoenix, so.
Were you doing iOS when you first got there?
No, I was doing .NET development. I did some like iPhone, well, just on the side, you know.
Yeah. How'd you make the switch?
It was kind of a long process,
Yeah.
but I just like.
I've heard it's kind of like
Yeah,
pulling teeth.
it's pretty hard. Honestly, I was like lucky that it happened, but I just like, I mean, it was about 2 years, and I was like, yeah, I really want to like be doing iOS full time, and then so I talked to another group, and they're like, oh, you're college hire, so we can't really do anything, and then luckily it happened with Urban Active, it just worked out. That's awesome.
How big is Joe's office here? 3,000.
Oh, wow.
Something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot.
A lot of folks, and I think they hired 200 like, a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Jeez. Is that because they're moving a lot of stuff here, or is it just new ventures?
Yeah, just no. We insourced everything. All IT just got insourced.
Yeah, it used to be like 2% outsourced
Yeah.
or something.
What company?
EDS was the big one. Yeah. And then they've just been flipping it now, so we still have a lot of contractors and stuff too, I feel like. But what about you, Stephen? What's your?
I work for.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah. Cool.
I'm doing well. I hope you're ready for a rollicking discussion.
Excited to hear about everything.
It's interesting because everyone has actually heard about everything. Just what we haven't done is discuss it, right? Because, it's like, I think there's some really interesting things that happened. Like the watch got saved, TV is still a zombie. It's like, okay. But it's not obvious. I mean, it's obvious that the watch got saved. The fact that the TV business model is still up is like, okay, fine. So we're trying to use just the example. Make sure I didn't bring my laptop. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna make it this way. So we will see.
Should be able to play TVs if that's what
That was my plan, to make sure I'm on the capital factory, not the guest. Okay, I'm on the factory. Now let's see. Our classroom.
Yes. Good. Good. Very good. Cool. Yeah. I'm sure going any like staging?
But
Yeah.
I did something but it's parse.
I wish you could show it out. Yeah.
next time.
So I used to have like a homeless hunger issue for that versus
Down here, okay? Did you find parking okay?
Yeah, so kind of like you.
Yeah. This is a good time to go down.
Yeah. And it should take me right off. This is primarily what
I took a couple this weekend.
Oh, really? I haven't actually tried it.
Yeah. I was with my friends and we were gonna go like, or they were gonna get like a fair, and I was like, dude, no, I got this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they just
Hi, come in. Carl. Good to meet you, Carl.
Yeah. Maybe do your demo first, because that would be the rest of the time for the.
Mine was
That's not
randomly
true.
open.
Yeah.
And I'm a digressive speaker, so
Plug that in somewhere?
I use the AirPlay.
You just AirPlay.
Oh, gotcha.
You gotta be on the main.
Oh, I've got to log in on there.
Pretty simple.
That's gonna be a little bit crappy.
Right.
Because we get I'm gonna explain why it's wiggling around.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what
Seem to have a lot of
shooting for. Maybe one.
You have to hurt yourself to have an excuse to have a big skateboard, right?
Well, it's just easier to get around. So.
Of course, of course, of course. This is
No, I-
done with the knee, is it like this?
Yeah, you can be on here, just scoot around, so it makes it a little easier to scratch it. Yeah, I just highlighted on someone who playing basketball and broke my foot.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's okay, no worries. What's your name?
I'm Andrew.
Andrew, Dustin. Nice to meet you.
What kind of code do you like to write?
I like to write Swift code.
Yeah.
It's good. That's what I'm doing right now. But I work at GM, so I helped out with Maven, so they're doing car sharing out.
Okay, so you know Billy Shears?
Right, it's the part of work.
She was at, I used to teach beginning iPhone.
Okay.
Yes,
That's how you can actually get the video.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, there's like 3,000, so sometimes it's hard to hit and miss, right?
Yeah.
That's cool though. Do you teach all 12?
No,
I taught my last class in the fall. I've been doing it for 7 years. On and off teaching various institutions just for fun. It doesn't it's kind of economically a stupid thing to do. I wish we were nice thing.
That's really cool. I love like, helping people. You know, it's like there's a guy where he's kind of new. It's like that's cool. And is that
Yeah. They have a nice continuing education program. People have to, I mean, you're young enough that you've not actually reinvented yourself. And it's a part of the problem with the large number of capital factories. I think that old people like me can't actually write code because they themselves have never started. And they had to actually ship technology.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not as hard when you're dealing with a world where everyone thinks you can't do it. It's a hard few things. But you're in a nice organization, it's not a young organization, so it's probably you get to see actually effective people on the ladder.
They'll be happy.
Anyway, so what do you like to do?
I mean, I like my current group. I don't know to get into app development because I've been doing it on the side. I really want to do it. It's just fun.
So he's like,
So he's moving to see
I forget where actually.
That's not really a GM yet.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, I like there's a lot of time off.
Yes.
I don't know, there's a lot of yeah.
She's good. I mean,
I don't know, there's a lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, I like my team.
And she's definitely good at iOS.
Yeah.
There's some things that are not so great at the end too.
Yeah, so
There's lots of things that are not great in every company. And I guarantee you, it's worse. And the point is, Start has a very, very different culture, and very different success story. And you watch some of the very, very hard at somebody who started 4 companies. I'm not anti-startup. I've been here, done it.
Last year they were doing
One of the things I find is sort of side effect is
good time to be
the biggest thing that I have with a lot of my engineering colleagues is that they don't really think that they're decisions that are. So my questions were really leading questions to see how well you feel about your career as a business. You failed every one. Because it's not that the things you said was bad at all.
Yeah.
Fine. But to understand why you're at GM versus some other place, that's actually
Yeah.
I mean, he has something that's worked out for us.
Swift is not a way. utilize Swift and rapid prototyping technology. This is
No,
enterprise
he was selling for a couple weeks.
So yeah, that's all awfully good enterprise quality. That said, when you need to shift inside the company or change to other organizations, understanding how to talk that way, to actually
It doesn't really apply to everyone.
It isn't DSI. What it is actually understanding customer relationships and how to maneuver them and to set them, work them correctly. Part of engineering is social engineering.
Yeah, no, that's true. I was yeah. But it's funny because it's like I'm starting to kind of understand it and how I do, so that's why it's ironic.
Well, you should set up, don't read any website that tells you how to set up a business plan. Any one of them, pick one that you like. Then develop the business, put you, and understand what your value prop is. All the things they tell you to figure out for investors. All right? Then go to your significant partners that you've invested in this business plan. And that process actually starts to help you think through what you're really doing. And if you do have a wife or a partner of some sort, they are a co-investor. And part of seeing how I make these risk decisions today because everyone's anyway, enough lecturing, I'm sorry.
No,
You're
I'm just
going to be on your ass a lot.
Yeah, it's true.
When's this come up?
I don't know, I'm not sure. I had it for about a month, and then they said I might need surgery. And if I do, it might be 10 months
Should we start? All working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Awesome.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is the monthly Austin iOS Developer Meetup. My name's Anthony. We've got a couple cool presentations tonight, or discussions tonight. First, Carl's going to talk about Ride Austin. He's been doing development on the iOS app, and then Andrew's going to talk about WWDC that he just got back from. So, got some cool stuff lined up.
Cool, thank you very much, Anthony. So first of all, about myself, I've been in Austin since '99. I went to UT, graduated in 2004, and since then been involved in the Austin tech startup scene, more or less. And most recently, I've worked on the Ride Austin app. You've all heard about Uber and Lyft. They left Austin, abandoned us, and so there's a bunch of startups that moved in. And one of the top players I would consider is Ride Austin. One thing that they really distinguish them is that they're actually a non-profit, and so they're just a little bit different. I'm just going to fire up the app and while talking about it. Unfortunately, our stage server went down just a few hours ago, and so I cannot show you the whole round trip. Otherwise, I would have been able to show you the driver side and the rider side. But oh well, maybe next time. So as you can see, the UI. Oops, it's not coming up. Let me see if the AirPlay went down. I think that's probably what happened. Classroom. There we go.
7 minutes to pick us up here, dude.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Right, 7 minutes. And as you can see, it's blinking. It actually doesn't show up here, but we're not on the cellular network, and with the Wi-Fi you don't get such good GPS, so it's not so accurate. Unfortunately, I can't show you the driver's side, otherwise I would have been able to give you a ride in my Maserati. That's not going to happen tonight. But so the cool thing is this app they started working on just in May, and so really fast ramp up, built up a team really quickly, got all the processes down, and to get this actually working. And it looks very much like Uber. I do admit that. And we just added the more car types, so you can actually choose to get an SUV or a premium car. It looked a lot different when we put out the app. It's only been live since June 15th. And yeah, the driver side is actually more interesting because you can see the ride requests coming in and all that, and it's a little more fancy. This is just what you probably all are familiar with already because you all used Uber. Now the cool thing is it's a non-profit, so you can round up your fare to the closest dollar amount, and then that goes to your favorite charity, which is pretty cool. Let me just show you. you
Do
can
you support driver tips like Lyft does?
Actually, that's not implemented yet, but that's one of the next things. Working on your favorite driver and then scheduling a driver, that kind of stuff. That's in the works.
The tips are very important. It's the whole reason I chose
Right.
Lyft instead of Uber.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because these guys don't make a lot of money.
Right, I absolutely agree. Well, this is what this app is all about, this service, because it's a non-profit, so it's all about giving more to the drivers, and then also the riders are supposedly getting cheaper rides. Now, I'm not sure if that's really the case for all the distances, but we could take a look. So, as an example, we can just set the pin down somewhere, and let me zoom in here. And what you can do is set the pickup location, and then let's choose my house and see what it actually says. I'm kind of curious. I've not checked that out. So you can, here I can technically request a ride. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to pick up a driver out there. You can get a fare estimate, and as you can see, that's not too bad actually. That's what I probably would have expected. It's from the tavern, I think it's $13, so that makes sense. So unfortunately, I can't show you the driver side. That was actually, it's more interesting from a technical standpoint. One thing is when I joined the team, the implementation architecture on the driver side was actually still relying on push notifications. Really scary because Apple is all about, hey, your app must not rely on functioning on push notifications. Now, we got away with it because it's an enterprise distributed app, so it didn't actually, the driver side didn't go through the Apple reviewers' hands, and so we were able to push it out. And I think it was important to get it out fast, to grab market share and whatnot, and that's really definitely what happened. And the riders, of course, store distributed. You got a question?
So what's your back-end infrastructure? What do you
It's actually a Tomcat Java server right now.
Okay.
And so one thing is, as I was about to get to the point, is that the push notification, really bad architecture, you can't rely on that. So when I joined the team, we ripped that out immediately. The app went live. And after a while, drivers wouldn't get their ride requests anymore because the more push notifications you send to a specific device, Apple will throttle the push notifications, and those ride requests would never make it to the driver. Big problem.
Right.
Ticked off drivers, ticked off riders, not good. So I joined the team. We ripped out the architecture that was relying on the push notification. That was quite complicated because the whole driver's UI and the services is very event-based, and then of course with the user actions. And so we had to refactor that all, and what we did, we put in long polling. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this
So
paradigm.
you didn't go to MQTT or anything like that?
Not what is
Message queuing.
Actually, no, we did not use a messaging service or a broker of any kind. What we do is actually long polling, so that's actually costly on the server side because it establishes a connection with the server and keeps that alive, basically. We reset that after a while because it's error prone, but it works so far. So we have also, of course, multiple instances and that kind of.
If you're ever willing
distributes the
to
load.
change that out, because it isn't a very good architecture.
Oh, I agree.
Okay. You should look at MQTT because it's a
Okay.
message queuing system designed for massive scale of small devices.
Okay.
I mean, Facebook Messenger runs on MQTT.
I had no idea. I
And
worked
so-
on ActiveMQ back in the day.
Yeah, don't
that's,
do that.
That's a long time ago, and I wouldn't recommend that.
No, there are plenty of open
But-
source implementations, and since you've already bit the Tomcat bullet, you're
Right.
screwed anyway. So
Yeah,
that's where we'll go
and you
with
know,
that.
I made that point too.
Okay, I mean, you're there, you may as
Right.
well stay, it has enterprise scale, and there's a bunch of good things as a result of that, but
Yeah.
if you're doing long polling, you've thrown most of that away, because to keep the Tomcat pipe open, Tomcat's a big.
It's a
endpoint.
problem, and whenever you have to restart the server, you got some downtime. That's one problem. You know?
Oh, joy.
So, oh yeah, I'm glad I work on the client. So, definitely a complicated system because it's integrated with the rider side, which is different from the driver, and then it gets delegated through the server, of course. So I just joined like 7 weeks ago, 6-7 weeks ago. The project is really new. I'm really, it's refreshing to see actually how well it works and how fast we were able to pull this all up. And the team also exploded in size and getting all the processes in. I mean, when I joined, you could check in directly into the master, really scary. I didn't pay attention. I mean, I would have definitely snuck in my Easter egg, my credit card shows up, free ride, right? But very refreshing to see how fast they were able to pull this up and get successful with this. Grab market share, that's what it's really all about. We do agile 1 week sprints, new features and defect fixes. I think a few days ago we had 5,000 rides. And again, I wasn't in the loop. The 5,000 rider, he got a whole month of free rides. I wish I would have known. I would have paid attention to time my ride request, but that didn't happen. Anyway, it's too bad I don't have the driver and the stage driver running. Otherwise, I would have been able to drive you around my Maserati, as I mentioned. But that's not going to happen. So this is pretty much what you can see in the rider app. There's not really much more to see. When you set request ride, you get like a shimmering view up there, and then the driver side gets that long polling event from the server, sends it out to the closest driver. Eventually, you can actually choose your favorite drivers, and then they will actually try to ping those first, and that's how it's going to work. Really young project and moving fast, and I'm really excited to work on it because it's a lot of fun.
So when are they going to support Apple Pay?
That's a good question. Right now it's all working on Stripe, and there's actually a couple of issues. Some specific cards are not supported, and so some people cannot actually sign up with their credit card they want to use because it's not 16 digits, and I'm not even familiar with those cards. Stripe just came out with 8.0, so we're hoping to just update that pod, and hopefully it'll just start working. Yeah. Lots of fun to work on. I mean, testing it is fun. I've used it actually with 2 devices. It's fun when you get like the requests from the testers, for a ride request, and then you send a message, tested messaging, don't puke on the backseat, that kind of stuff. Lots of fun to work on. So yeah, I don't really have too much to say otherwise because the driver's not running, but otherwise I've been able to show that.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if you guys pulled out the push notifications, how are you keeping contact when like the application's not active? Is it polling when
the driver side is long polling. The rider actually does get push notifications.
Okay.
And the rider side is distributed to the store, and so there is messaging that way. And then of course from the driver you can actually contact the rider. So that actually works with SMS or phone.
On the driver's side, I assume they're all kind of like this. Like they're just expected to keep it open.
That's a good point you bring up. It actually works in the background, and we use local notifications. So whenever they're running in the background, the long polling still refreshes every minute or two and continues long polling. And then whenever the notification comes in, it shows a server event. It triggers the local notification on the device. The driver sees that.
Okay.
And then also you can change the destination, during the ride and whatnot. And there's also the trip starts automatically, or is supposed to start automatically. There's a little bit problems because sometimes the driver does not start the ride automatically. So then we had routes that were all warped, and so we just added a mechanism that when there's a problem or there's a connectivity problem, it actually caches those locations in the core data and then submits those as soon as connectivity is reestablished, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's still a bunch of problems. I'm not going to mention those. We're working on those.
It's not as simple as it appears.
Right, yeah, it's very integrated. So you got to have everything running, and testing it is difficult because it's so reliant on the GPS. So you can put your GPS location in the simulator, but initially the driver relied on push notifications, and there's no push notification to the simulator, and anyway, it caused all the kind of problems testing it and actually running it in development mode. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have about it. I hope you guys try it. Maybe the 10,000 rider gets another month. I don't know. It would be cool. I hope I'm that guy.
So I know like apps that are like Uber for X are like really popular ideas these days. Were there any like SDKs or frameworks that you guys used that helped out?
Oh, okay. Actually, no. This is all custom made.
All custom?
Yeah. I mean, we just added the new ride types essentially. As you can see, you can choose which one you want to use.
Yeah.
And then the drivers that have nice cars, they'll just sign up for all ride types, and then they get the premium riders.
Cool.
And that's how that works. Yeah.
Are there any libraries or technologies you're using for, say, your maps or your
We use
the way
Google
your routes
Maps,
are calculated?
right? And that's actually good to bring up because initially we wanted a free Google API account, and we ran into that in production where we hit that limit of requests, and suddenly nobody was able to pull up the map and locations and whatnot. That was a big problem. And then they re-upgraded, and it all started working again. But that's also an issue. If Google doesn't reply or doesn't work, we rely on Apple Maps, and so reverse geocoding, that kind of stuff is used. And the thing is, it's that the geocoding and all that happens actually heavily on the server side. So the client is really heavily, just user requests and actions, and those events get relayed to the server, and then that's how that works. And the driver basically is the same. It's basically a state machine driver. Yeah.
Awesome. And like, how do you track a route and then sort of relay that to the servers?
I actually haven't worked in that specific part because I'm so heavily on the rider and driver.
Okay.
We just take the geo lat and long, and that gets submitted, and that creates the route.
So all the different
And so,
coordinates along the path, and then you.
right. I mean, there's
there
quite a
on
bit
the
of
server
stuff
side.
happening on the server side. You know, it needs to figure out who's the closest driver and that kind of stuff, and then send him the information, the ride requests, and then see if he even accepts. And then if drivers don't accept a lot of rides for some reason, they'll get put back in the line or actually deactivated, that kind of stuff. When you do a ride, at the end you get it actually does a pop-up and you can see the route, and if everything went well, you can see the exact route the car went, and then also you can rate it and give comments and whatnot, so that's how that works. Yeah. Anyway, any other questions? All right, well, hey, thanks for my 5 minutes in the limelight. I'm excited about working on this, it's a lot of fun.
Good work.
Yeah,
Good work.
thanks for sharing.
Howdy. How is everybody? Okay, let's see how this, see if we can get this thing hooked back up. All right, classroom. Yeah, should see it there. Okay. Let's talk a bit about WWDC because the lottery has changed things in a big way, okay? I've been to 23 WWDCs, but I haven't been able to go for the last 2 years. And that really hits my business actually quite hard because I have relationships that I maintain with other developers to build larger teams. And so it's actually, Apple's change is kind of grim, and it was somewhat infuriating to actually run into people who actually had never shipped an app on the App Store at WWDC. And that just sort of kind of upset me because I know there are plenty of people, plenty in this room, I'm sure, who would have liked to have gone to WWDC who had shipped apps. So I'm not a big fan of Apple's lottery process. What that means is that you go to WWDC differently now. That if you do go, you actually try a different strategy. Whereas before, you could be pretty haphazard and just meet people, etc. Now, because everything's videotaped, you spend your time in the labs, period, talking to engineers. Because you can get all the videos afterwards. And since they don't allow you to ask any questions at the video sessions anymore, don't even bother to go to the sessions unless there's nothing in the labs that you can do. All right. Because of that, that means you bring your laptop, you bring, get ready to install the new Xcode, get ready to bring a couple of sacrificial devices, okay, because you are going to sacrifice them to new OSs, because you want to actually ask them questions while the engineers are there. Those 1,000 engineers they talk about, they really are 1,000 engineers brought in. One for, they basically bring in the whole core data team, or they bring the whole core location team, or the whole maps team. Those people are there, and you can get names. Okay, so when you file your bug reports, you can say, attention to this person. And it will get routed to that person, and the conversation context will happen. For example, I have a problem specifically in security. I have another problem specifically in core location. And I have actually an arrangement with 2 engineers to instrument my app to help them get better data to fix their problem. Okay? That wouldn't have happened without going to the labs. And in fact, the lottery hurt Apple there, because if they let me in last year, the core location bug, I filed in March 2015. All right, and I would have done the exact same thing then. So what that means is not that I'm this super guy, but rather that bring your problems, because the people are there to help you. And that is the scarcest resource, is that you can sit there and look at code and show them problems, and then they can say whether you're done the right thing or the wrong thing. Okay, yes sir?
How did Apple handle registration for WWDC in the past?
In the past, before it was sold out, it didn't sell out, so there was a problem.
I mean, you bought tickets?
Yeah,
I mean,
just
like
bought
you went
tickets.
for a concert? And
Yeah.
First come, first served?
Yeah, first come, first served.
Okay.
Right, I mean, this didn't start selling out till 2010, okay? And so I've been going since before WWDCs. I've got Macintosh development team posters, right, that you got from the road shows, right? This is the novel thing that you have a lot of.
I noticed in the keynote, Tim Cook in several years now has called attention to how many of the audience is their first time there, as he's taking pride in the fact that many people may have never shipped an app before. I think you're upset about it. He seems to be taking pride in it.
Well, don't get me started on the sharecropper aspect of being an Apple developer. Okay, there are things that are not good about being an Apple developer, and one of them is there's a lot of competition now, a lot of competition that doesn't understand business now, which really compresses billing rates now, and the more developers Apple spins up, the more competition you have for your services. Even if you're an employee at some other company, it suppresses wages and a whole bunch of other things. So without getting into that in too much detail, I don't actually regard it as a great thing that Apple is trying to bring in a lot more competitors into the development side of the house. Particularly since we have 1.5 million apps on the App Store, 70% of which are dead. I mean, I do apps for clients. They tend to not want me to talk about their stuff. So all of my sample apps, the highest volume of my sample app is an app I haven't updated since iOS 5. Okay, it's a weight loss app. Okay, and people download it, they use it. It basically helps track their weight. Boom, they're happy people. It's got an iOS 6 interface. It's got all that stuff, but and it hasn't even been tuned for the iPhone 5. Okay. There are a lot of dead apps, and the more competition, that makes noise in the marketplace and for a whole bunch of things, and so we could spend a long time talking about that. So I know why Tim is proud. He's proud because we do have a male-centric universe. There's not a woman in this room. All right. Do we have anyone of any kind of non-white ethnicity? We have one Asian gentleman in the room. Okay, so fundamentally, what Tim's trying to do is the formal trying to enhance diversity. That's a good thing, right? I make an effort to go when I meet women developers to help them see if there's anything I can do. One of the virtues of being an old man is that no one thinks you're hitting on them. Okay. Come on, smile, guys. That just popped again. So did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the first thing is, if you win the golden ticket next year, queue up all your problems. And in fact, I would take, in preparation, just when you file an issue that's kind of odd with Apple, a bug report or something, make your own issues list so that when you go to WWDC, you have an issues list to knock off and you know whose labs you're going to go to, et cetera. And basically, anything you have a question about, this is the time to answer it, right? Just any kind of weirdness, right? So, for example, in Swift, I have a problem that I use maps, and I have heterogeneous arrays to do annotations. Anyone who's done anything with map has a problem of the heterogeneous array. It means it can be many different types, all of which implement the MK annotation protocol. Well, when you write that in Swift, and you then want to do some kind of set operations and a whole bunch of stuff, you have to actually cast it from the annotation into an NS object, do your operations, then cast it back out into the protocol. And geez, this seems like a lot of work for language that's supposed to be protocol, studly, and all of that stuff, right? Turns out that I pretty much had the best answer to do it, and that they have a problem, and it will not be addressed until Swift 4. But I would not know that without actually showing them the 12 lines of code in question. And I bet the guy was totally surprised that the problem exists. But if you just don't collect your little gotchas and weirdnesses, then you're not going to be ready to exploit the unique resource that is WWDC. The second thing you get out of WWDC, which is what we're going to, I hope, try to replicate here, is the sort of the engineer sussing out of whether something is real or not. So for example, everyone here watched the keynote, right? Right. Now, I'm in location services, Carl's in location services, a lot of people are in location services, and there was an announcement. One of the announcements was that they were going to have an extension architecture for the map stuff. Well, there were no sessions on maps. None of the published sessions happened. The MapKit people there were there for 2 hours tops. Okay? No one was ready. If you look at the MapKit documentation on the extensions, it isn't even done. They don't even know what they're doing. So how do you find this out? Well, you either are all deeply in, or you find out by just talking to people and just shooting the breeze in the lab, or finding someone to have lunch with. It also brings up the other piece of advice. Never eat lunch with the same person twice. And never eat with a coworker. Never. You did not go to WWDC to talk to people that you already know. Your coworkers are death to you because they already know you. They already know everything. Now, it's very hard as an engineer. We like to we're introverts. We like to stay with the people we like. But you're going to meet people. If for no other reason that when your current job goes sideways, you have someone to call. And so that's very much why you don't want to have any of these lunches with people, because you want to hand out your personal cards. Everyone has personal cards, right? Ones that are not corporate cards, right? Because you want to hand out your personal card to these personal connections as you build your connections to the industry, right? So enough of my going to WWDC too much. So what do you all think was the big theme of this developer conference? This is a conversation now. Anybody have any thoughts?
It was all about messaging opening up for the developers, right?
You got part of it. Messaging is an important part of it, but the even more important part of it was the second clause in your statement. Everything got opened up. Siri got opened up. Messages got opened up. Maps got opened up, even though we can't find evidence of how to extend them. The extension architecture that they invented a couple of years ago for just putting notifications has also now been driven into the watch, driven into this whole fundamental basis of extending any architecture. Basically, you're able to give them a piece of code that they run in their context, that they have control over the whole execution space. And that's given them the confidence to actually open up more APIs. Of the APIs that are there, the ones that actually appeared to be the most mature were the Siri extensions, which sort of surprised me. But remember, Siri's been there since October 2011 on the 4S. And they've been extending Siri for a long time in a bunch of other contexts. And so it's probably been one of the things that's been beating up on the extension architecture the longest. Messages, I didn't attend any of the messages sessions, so I couldn't say how good or bad the various extension architecture is. But that was the big news. And if you read, I just went to sleep again, sorry. Okay, so this is Mac Rumors. If you look at Apple's foils itself, this is all sort of the discussion. I think Messages has been overhauled with new features, digital touch, tap back, all of these nice things. But from a developer's perspective, all right, this is the thing here, the Messages App Store. Create apps and extensions in the store. Everything else about that is very nice stuff, features you need to know, etc. But the reason you go to WWDC is that if you're a messaging app person and that's announced, you make damn sure that you're in the labs. You don't actually care about the video. You really don't care about the video. You want to go get the docs, read the docs, take some time off from the beer quaffing, read the docs, the next day you're at the labs. Now, sometimes they put the labs on the exact same day that they announced the feature, which kind of sucked, but they're saving their time and bringing their engineering team up. Fortunately, some of these APIs were available the day of the keynote, so you could actually research them ahead of time.
Was there any interesting insights you found from talking to people in the labs about messaging?
Since I wasn't in the messaging side of the house, I didn't ask anyone in specific. Everyone seemed to be focused on getting the quick wins just because it was such a new idea, so the stickers and that sort of stuff is what many people spoke about. So there was a lot of excitement there, which also means there's going to be a lot of competition in that area. So the thing to think about messages is not that it's an app in itself, is that anything you add to messages really has to sort of augment your existing business. Because, it's, there's going to be a lot of competition and a lot of noise, and so unless you really plan to put some marketing dollars behind your messages feature, you're got a lot of noise. You should focus on, or I would advise you to focus on a different path where messages is part of the game.
What effect does this openness thing have on developers like yourself and other independent developers? Good, bad, just different?
Oh, I think it's good. I think it's good. I mean, I've already set moving back into iOS development 7 years ago now, all right, I focused on networks, databases, and basically the stuff that it was harder for other people to do. And so one of the other vectors I use to identify things that help put me head and shoulders above other developers is I focus on what is the new stuff that's non-trivial. There's a bunch of new stuff that came out, like all of the update to Swift. That's actually all about making Swift easier, okay? That doesn't, becoming the Swiftmeister, even though I believe I'm a very good Swift programmer these days, isn't going to actually make me more money. Because a lot of people are going into Swift because it's an easier programming environment. Okay? So I would look at the new extension architectures, looking at the messages stuff or the Siri extensions as pretty difficult things. Siri in particular is going to be difficult. Not because the extension model is weak, but because almost no one outside Apple has any experience creating a verbal interface.
So this openness is open to the public. Apple's been, of course, using these extensions, APIs for a long time. They've matured them enough to the point where they can let the outside world use and access them. And they have to assume that at least for a period of time, the outside world is not going to be as savvy and smart with it as they were.
Outside world today is not as savvy and smart with most of Apple's technologies as they are. I mean, so that's always a truth. I mean, I'm not trying to slam you, it's more of they're used to that. Their job is to make it easier so that more people can use their stuff. My belief is, right, how many of you had the experience of walking into a room with a new graphic designer or a graphic designer who thinks he knows his or her stuff, okay? And they haven't read the HIG, haven't read the Human Interface Guidelines. They think they know better than Johnny Ive's team. I'm a HIG up programmer. I always start with, what does the HIG do? And then that also happens to be the thing that it has the least amount of code to do. So you start with that, get the HIG, and then the designer comes in and says, oh, you got to do all this extra stuff. And so then I put the price tag on the table for all that extra stuff. And the business person looks at that and says, how do we get there? And what I start doing is I'm not trying to subvert the designer, but if they haven't read the HIG, I know that they're not going to make a good product yet. Because if they're not going to even bother to pay attention to the culture of iOS, then they're not going to be able to leverage the cultural learning. So coming back to your question, what is the culture of Siri, of spoken interfaces? they've got some rules, but it's a very small set of rules. I mean, these are more guidelines, you know, in the Pirates of the Caribbean sense, right? Come on, smile, guys. You guys are very grim. Okay. I'm not going to do a Jeb Bush, please clap, but come on, I want to see some smiles. But I guess in the long answer to your question is find the things that other people don't know how to do and become good at.
I'm triggering off of your earlier sentiments. You feel that there's too many, the bar has been lowered. The barrier to entry is too low for people who really know what they're doing. There's a lot of noise in the system. And the more open you make all of these sophisticated APIs, then the more compounded this syndrome you just described earlier is going to be, at least for initially. Is it good news, bad news, one of those things?
No, I wouldn't. I actually look at the extensions as something that actually helps me grow my business in a big way, because I'm faster at learning these new techniques and technologies than the kids who are not.
It's an opportunity for you if you jump on it right away because you have an edge because they're fast.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so now is the time to jump on it, and that's why we're here at the iOS group. This is the elect of the Austin community smart enough to come to this or the other two iOS groups. This community is actually trying to invest in themselves, right? That's a huge leg up over many of our colleagues, right? So my advice to you is, if you like the messaging, go there. The Siri, though, is the one that's the one that's actually going to change the nature of iOS apps and change some opportunities. And, oh, by the way, intellectually, it's the most interesting of all of them, right? I mean, it's like, oh, I get to think about conversations and get to think about all of the other aspects. And so, you know, the fantasy of us computer science people and mathematicians forever has been, you know, spoken language, right? You know, I used to analyze tweets for a living, all right? Just doing named entity recognition is a really challenging problem, and Apple's got all this cool stuff, all right? So to build a conversational interface, this is the first time any of us have been able to do this in a hoi polloi context. So from an intellectually interesting perspective, that would be great. So let's take Carl with Ride Austin. What would Ride Austin do to actually make a verbal interface? Okay. Yeah. For him, it may actually be better for him to do messages first, because he'll have friends coordinating, and then there's actually some natural things that you could do to amplify Ride Austin in a messaging context. And so that's what I would do first, until you have friends with Android apps. Do you have an Android app yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right,
1
so
month. 1 month.
Right, but that's going to hurt you in terms of
Right,
exploiting all
absolutely.
this
It
other
already is,
stuff.
for sure.
Right, and
But
they
that-
did not
that's-
announce a messages for Android.
Right, but that's the thing, that API should just be using messages, and then you can be like, hey, I need a ride, and you don't even have to open the UI or something like
Right.
that. There you
Right.
go.
So, you know, that basically is also Siri tied into things. So there's, you know, those two big things. You know, you can rest assured that our friends at Uber are doing that too.
Right.
Right.
They have a lot more people to work on that.
It's okay, it's okay, you'll win, you'll win. Because there are no intrinsic barriers to entry to your business, as you're proving. That their barrier to entry was that they existed. As soon as they left, we have 3 companies filling them, one of which is a nonprofit like yourself. So it's like, okay, so very, sorry about letting this go to sleep all the time. I wonder how anyway, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, so Siri to me was the big news. The open extension architecture, which is leveraging into not just notifications, not just watch, but into Siri, into messages. They've gone all in on that. So basically, if I wanted to say what is the technology I wanted to look at leaving here, the foundation piece is go learn how the Apple extension architecture works, because that's how all of these pieces are functioning. So go learn how to do that. Go write some sample apps, go pull Apple sample apps down, dork around with stuff. Then the Siri stuff is really alluring, and it looked really solid. Okay, unlike the map stuff that was missing in action, no, they had solid presenters, they had lots of people that were there. This was a big deal to the team. Not saying it wasn't a big deal to the map team, but it's very clearly they were not ready to announce anything. But time was time. So, any other techniques or things that you all heard about from WWDC? I mean, lock screen overhauls. Has everybody downloaded at least the beta and installed it on a sacrificial device? Okay. So Carl, how many phones do you carry with you?
2. It's my 5S
All right,
and the
score.
6
I beat you
plus.
by 1. And the new one is a 5. See, I always carry the fastest phone and the slowest. For OS 10, this is now the slowest. So this is my sacrificial OS 10 phone. Right. And
64-bit, is that the limitation?
no, this is 32. It's a 5.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
They're just basically no longer supporting the 3.5-inch screen. Yes.
Huzzah.
Huzzah, yes, huzzah. Well, you know, we do have to move forward. On the other hand, to think about this as a phone that had an active life for 5 full solid years, right? And, you know, in September, it's not going to become dead, right? We support, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I support, you know, the prior OS to the shipping OS, okay? And I actually won't drop the support for OS 8 until there actually is something that I feel is a critical feature and I have to drop it, okay? So this is going to be in my test matrix for a while too. But get yourself a sacrificial phone. They're cheap, right? You can get a 5 get an unlocked 5 for probably $80 tops, maybe probably more than 40, okay? And run OS 10 on it, and it runs fine. OS 10.2 beta 2 just shipped today, so you know, you can see all the fancy notifications, UIs, and you know, it all runs. It is nice to run it on the slowest machine because you actually see the drag, you see all of the problems, all of the things that aren't working well, right? Which teaches you a lot of things, right?
Well, the crazy thing is how much it improved too. Like, I think it was iOS 7 when I remember doing that. It was like, it seemed so slow, but then within like a month it was way better. Like, once it actually was released, it was like, oh, I didn't even notice anymore, you know?
Right. So get yourself a sacrificial phone if you're a phone developer. If you're an iPad developer, I mean, it just eviscerated my iPad stack of iPads, right? All of my 2s, my Mini 1, my iPad 3. If you had an iPad 4, it's gone too. So basically everything that's not an Air or a Mini 2 or later is gone in OS 10. This is a Mini 4, which I bought specifically because it had the 2 gig of RAM and would support multitasking. And I like the small form factor. Let's see.
Was there any like really interesting ideas you heard other developers talking about with some of these new frameworks?
I did, but those were private dinners, and they were sort of kind of client operations, pseudo selling things, and so I can't. There was a lot of ferment though.
I guess like any like themes, like, you know, we all watched the keynote stuff, like any common themes that you noticed from like just talking to people there that you thought was like an interesting insight?
Okay. Well, I have 2 more insights to share, which will, I think, speak to that. First of all, this WWDC, they saved the watch.
Yeah.
All right. Watch OS 3 makes this thing work, okay, and work nicely. Though I've not had the stones to replace my main phone with OS 10. Okay, other people have, and they say it's okay. I'm going to let them go a few days before I do it, but I do want to see the new watch because my location services app can exploit it for my clientele. So they saved the watch. TV is still a zombie. And the reason I call it a zombie is because I'm not a TV channel vendor and I'm not a game vendor. If you're not in one of those 2 markets, the TV is pointless because it doesn't have any web login, so you can't actually talk to any arbitrary service, All right, so for example, I've got this app called Image Retriever. Image Retriever goes out, pulls things down from Twitter, life is good. It's a fun little demo app. It would be an excellent screensaver. Here, let me show it. Not because I want to, but just, you know, basically it's fun and it just runs things around. Oh, Miley, get out of here. Okay. Because she's almost always wearing something inappropriate. But you know, this is a fun little app. I'd love to have this on the Apple TV. Okay, but because I can't do web logins, I can't do this app. So the Apple TV is dead to me. It really sucks because it's a fun platform. It's what I've been waiting for. They didn't fix that. Okay. They didn't fix that. So if you're in the TV channel business or in the games business, the Apple TV is an excellent platform. They extended the platform, they added the fact that anyone's phone can now become a Siri remote. That means games now can have multiple controllers. You used to only be able to put 4 of the D-pad style controllers in one Siri remote. My assumption is the reason they made this a remote now is because, hell, if everybody's phone is a remote, then you better have multiples of them talking to the Bluetooth controller. So we'll see where that goes, but that means you have a higher likelihood of being able to build a 2-player game with just Siri remotes and without D-pad controllers. So that's pretty exciting if you're a gamer, because it's an awesome platform as a gamer. Right? It's inexpensive, casual games. It's used for all sorts of other media stuff. So if you're in the gaming business, if you do Tiny Wings or...
I actually published a game in May, I should have mentioned that earlier, Crossword Wars, free. It's actually peer-to-peer using Game Center. And the problem is it's way too difficult, nobody downloads it, it's buried, nobody finds it, but that's maybe something that should switch to the TV.
Right.
Speaking of
Game
which, are
Center's
they
missing.
pulling Game Center?
What?
Or is it Apple gonna pull
That's a
Game
good
Center?
question.
It's missing in action.
I think it's gone in iOS 10, isn't it?
I haven't noticed, but I haven't looked for it. But
That's why they're not promoting my game, damn it.
So, I guess the biggest assessment for me is watchOS is real. They totally changed the architecture. Glances are gone now. It's now all about smart app, and there are all sorts of prefetch operations that they're now giving you messages for. So it's basically the way I felt it should have been. Okay, glances were way too limiting. The other big thing about the watchOS is if you can cram whatever it is you're doing into a complication, do so.
I have a question about complications. Will they let you have one if it just acts as a shortcut, like as a quick way to get to your app, or does it have to display updated data?
If they have to approve it, it has to show something that's worthwhile to flip your wrist over for.
More and more than launching as a shortcut on a watch
Right.
face.
Right. Our
Can't that
Apple
just be a,
limit-
can't that just be a time? I mean, can't it just be one at a time?
Well, you know, the complications are the little widgets, right?
Yeah, but
And so they always want, the whole point of the complication is to add some added bit of data to your screen such that it's worth having it on the scarce screen real estate. But a button is not enough. They would tell you, put it in the dock.
right.
They implemented the feature that I was feeling I had to implement, but I'm glad they did. They put in the panic button feature on the watch. And that's a really nice feature to add. So I don't know if I answered your question though.
Yeah, I think so.
They drove home very much that they want anything that's a complication to actually provide some data for bringing the risk up to look at things. So what do you all think? Watching from home, what do you all think? Yes, sir.
So did you actually use the watchOS? Because I read a watchOS app, and in testing it, I decided it was useless because it wasn't fast enough. I mean, it wasn't that my app wasn't fast enough. It was that by the time you got to do whatever you were going to do, it just wasn't,
everyone in my circle of friends who has a WatchOS app and has updated, and that's like 3 people, say it's ridiculously faster, right?
So they may really have fixed.
They may really have fixed it, okay? So I would, if you actually think there's a business behind your stuff, it's worth exploring.
Well, I mean, I really wrote it to solve my problem, but I'm sure other people have exactly the same problem. Now, whether you can even sell a WatchOS app for 99 cents, I have no idea. You know?
Right. Speaking of 99 cents, the other labs, they don't talk about these other labs, but the app review people are there, the design staff. In other words, one of the most important labs you can go to is that you can sign up for 30 minutes with Apple UI designers. Okay, and you have to be up at 7 a.m. and logged in, and you press that button because it sells out in like a minute. But in addition to the design staff, I also spoke with the export control people because I'm heavy into crypto, so I had to clarify some issues with them. I also spoke with the App Store business people about subscriptions. And my business model is kind of odd in that the client who wanders around with the phone doesn't actually give me money. Their accountant gives me money. And is that a subscription, or are they buying access to the data? They don't even have to use an iPad or an iPhone to get the data. So that I've got this really weird business model, and of course I was extremely depressed to find out that the very first thing Apple did was refer me to Apple Legal. It's actually great news that they referred me to Apple Legal now. Okay, referring me to Apple Legal after I've already made a commitment to their platforms would have sucked on my reporting product, would have totally sucked. And so being able to get this negative feedback early lets me change course before other investments have happened. But I can tell you that because they referred it to Apple Legal, if I'd done it via email, it would have gone to silence. And I wouldn't know what the issue was at all. Now I have a good idea what the issue is in my business model. I'm changing my business model to actually push Apple out of the store, out of my business totally, as a result of that one comment. The woman was very nervous about coming back up to me afterwards to talk to me about it. She knew I wouldn't like it. I was very gracious about it. Well, that helps these days. But being able to talk to export control, to talk to the app review people. If you have an app review problem, they're there. Okay. It helps. Just if you had an app review issue, even if you're not having it right now, to go in and talk to them and actually understand what went on their side of the relationship. Okay? And it's worth the 15 minutes to 30 minutes that you can get with these people. So these other labs are really valuable. And so again, the resource is not what you get in video. And so I want to encourage you to go to these things. So for example, how many people here actually write apps that use SSL, TLS, HTTP connections, HTTPS? Does everyone here use REST apps? Do you all realize you all have to get export compliance? Every one of you? The rules are very clear. If you use crypto and you initiate a cryptographic session, you are using crypto. Even if it's Apple stuff, you are using crypto. So if you haven't gone through that process, it's not very hard. My attorney says I can't tell you anything much about it other than you can get it. It's not hard, but you have to talk to your attorney because the law is involved. And you have to interact with the government directly. It's not hard to do, but he's very adamant. You have to go read these docs. I can't tell you what their answer is. Other than that, you can get it done too. But these are the things that they confirm for us by going to these face-to-face sessions. So what other things would you all like to know about?
Any mention of the Android game? Sometimes Cook will make some mention about gaming or whatever. I didn't hear anything this time. Any buzz around there on getting more market share?
I don't think anyone in the Apple community actually cares that much, because we're on the high profit side of the business.
They just dismissed the competition from Android?
No, they didn't dismiss the competition, but most of us do. And the reason we do is, if we're in the West, then, and we're already in the iOS business, we're already in a high-end marketplace, typically. If we're in the East, while Apple's pushing hard there, that's the Android stronghold. And it was always intended to be the Android stronghold.
You talking about the United States?
No, I'm talking Asia Pacific.
Oh.
Asia Pac. Okay. There are, of those 1.5 billion or 2.5 billion Android phones, they're not in the US. All right? They're rough parity in the US between Android and iOS. It's rough parity. So where are those phones? Are they in Europe? There's some measure of an advantage in Europe, but the big advantage is, over in China and India. Okay, when you think about the population of China and India, we look at our economics. We have a middle class, right? What they have is a Poisson distribution. The median's down here, right? So this is actually, I guess I got it wrong. They have is a very spiked area of economic value. Out of 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion people in India, 100 million are what we would call middle class. Not so much U.S. middle class, but of the middle class characteristic financially. They have families. There's food is taken care of. Health is. They're not crammed in tenements. They don't have the leaking tin roofs. Basically, middle class life for India. About 100 million of those. Same thing in China. Each one of these middle classes is the same size as Japan. When we think about it, all right, Japan, the third or fourth largest economy on the planet, these are as large as. So all of these people down here in China and India who have smartphones, they're all buying Android.
Because they don't believe in paying for apps. Or
Well,
software
that's the software thing, but these people are buying because they don't have much money.
Oh, the phones themselves are
They're
just.
buying the phones
Oh, yeah,
themselves.
okay.
And then there's very little software business on top of that. I mean, the businesses that work over there are things like WeChat and Baidu and stuff like that are very much incremental cost, incremental value derivation. Right? So when we look at this billion over here, it's not going to be good for Western software people at all. Now, if you have Western software and have some unique ability to distribute into that community, then it could work. Right, so I guess an answer to your question, it's not that we don't speak to for or against Android. It's that it doesn't enter our world.
So maybe the question is not so much the relative market share to Android for reasons you just said, but the growth of Apple iOS in an absolute way.
Well, there are over 1 billion devices, and that's grown since 2 years ago when it was just 600 million devices. Right.
Did anyone talk about the effect of the, what's the new 4-inch screen, 5S?
The 5SE,
SE.
which is basically this phone.
So a good thing, bad thing, or? doesn't
As
matter?
software developers, I think it's a great thing because it pushes more options down that panel, right?
Mhm.
Basically, Apple's selling as a premium class product. As a premium class
This is
product.
mentorship one from Austin.
As a premium class product, to actually have it compete against the high end of the low dollar Android stuff is a good thing. Okay.
Yes, spreadsheet, thanks. Thank you. Nice thing.
I answered it, right?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Were there any things that you learned by being at WWDC that just kind of you wouldn't have gotten from watching the videos and things, just things about the frameworks? They were like, oh, that's awesome, and that you wouldn't have learned from except by asking the questions of the engineers there.
Oh, yes, you definitely need to go. They were running one of the labs, one of the most important labs, was the Swift open house and the Xcode open house, as well as to go to any of the instrument sessions. To sit down and have them look at your code and tell you how to use instruments better. You're never going to get that, but that's in my lab's statement. But it's not just a specific framework. They want you to use the tools well also. So everyone in this room should try to get the golden ticket. Everyone should try, and if you do, go prepared to be in the labs. In all of the labs.
That ticket just covers entry, right? You've got to get yourself there and pay for all
Yeah,
that.
you got it there, and
all
you
the
got
food and everything.
Yeah. And if you have my problem, then you eat too much.
And those tickets are not transferable, as I understand?
Not transferable.
So you either go as you or nobody goes for that ticket.
Right. So, so any other APIs that I might have attended? I mean, I spent a lot of time with security people, so I can talk to a lot to security issues if you like. I spent a lot of time with core location people, a lot of time with core data people.
Did you look at the speech framework that came out? They have the Siri version that's like talking to the AI assistant. There was also the speech framework that they opened up that's just speech recognition, and I think I'm interested in audio apps, so I'm looking at the documentation, a little video they had, but I didn't know if you got to chat with anyone about that.
I did not, but that's part of, this is the big openness WWDC, that this feature that used to just be in the keyboard, right? Yes, was in the keyboard. Now is available for all of us.
Yeah.
So, that's a future talk opportunity for you to give us. Seriously, it doesn't take much.
Yeah, I was looking at it. There's it's a lot of the big players are opening up now. IBM's Watson has been doing it for a while. Google's voice recognition is in beta. And now Apple's. It's a little limited from what I saw. It's like they're limited to like 1 minute. They kind of want you to just be able to do little snippets of things and send it in and transcribe. So there's not like transcribe a couple hour long business meeting just yet. I don't think is their intended use case, but hopefully.
No, never.
Never.
Seriously, never. And the reason is why do they provide it at all? They provide it for things like messages, like telling Siri to do things. So it's all about short stuff. Almost certainly they will have they'll have throttles on board. They'll have limited amounts of messages. If you send too much sound for too long, you'll get throttled out. And everyone who does a service has to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're hopefully like me, people like you who are saying, oh, let's go replace drag and dictate with this, right? And there are people that see that as a potential option. And it's not a bad option, not a bad thing to try, but they will shut it down because they don't like being abused. So, anything else? So the other thing, the big thing on Cocoa Touch, let's talk a bit about Cocoa Touch. The big thing about Cocoa Touch, it's not here, is the adaptability of your API, of your UI layout. So it is a really big deal for you to embrace in their mind, and I think in my mind too, for you to embrace the traits and the constraints models that they have in terms of supporting the multitasking. So for example, come over here, okay, so here's Retriever, which you saw, right, it's, it basically runs here in the small size. And so it basically is running it.
It's not up.
Oh, it's not up, I'm sorry. Here, let's turn that up. So, okay, so as you can see, for me, Image Retriever is a consulting calling card app. I do all of the features to basically make everything work, right? And so here I am, it's actually now acting like it's an iPhone, right? So it's a regular height and compact width, right? And the UI is designed such that, it's only 280 wide versus 320, come out here now. So now it's still compact width and regular height, except it's a different width. And it's a width that you don't get in hardware, right? And if we come all the way over here, all right, so you can see I actually haven't, okay, so, let's see, see, okay. What happened there is my app, once it finally can take over the full screen, does, and then it starts driving the Apple TV directly. So that's one of those things you have to figure out, right? What did you want to have happen in a two-screen moment, right? And so that was me learning these things. And so you get these corner cases that you have to worry about. So mapping onto this stuff. So for example, when I move to just half here, okay, notice I don't resize any of these images which should have been resized so that they would be bigger, right? So they actually have two whole shows, two whole videos on adaptability, part 1 and part 2. And I sat in the first one, and it was really, really interesting. This is, they put this adaptability, these traits into the OS to support this multitasking as well as to support the 6S Plus, the 6 Plus and the 6S Plus, which is compact and regular until it's in landscape, in which case it's regular and compact, which has a very different layout pattern. It's the only device, and it's only in that one orientation, whereas iPads are always regular and regular in all these cases. So there's a bunch of, they've made Xcode 8 be much smarter about this, and Interface Builder and specifically is easier for you to manipulate the various settings for each of these different trait combinations. So they're trying to make it easy for you to be on many different sizes. They're trying to make it easy for you to actually think about the layout properly. I don't think they're going to spring a bunch of new sizes on us. Right? I think they've done that. They got the iPad Pro, which is the big dog. They got the 6 Plus, 6S Plus. That's not going to change much. Okay. They got the 6, and they got the 5S. They got the SE. Right. Those are their iPhone form factors, and then the various form factors of the iPads, the iPad Pro and the iPad Pro 9.7, the small iPad Pro. All of those have their set of constraints. I don't believe they're going to be changing them at all to speak of in the next year. I mean, only they know their market demand, but I'm not seeing any punditocracy saying that the current screen settings are inadequate for market demand. Remember, before the 6 Plus came out and the 6S, there was a lot of evidence about the success of Samsung and HTC and these larger form factors, right? There's no buzz about any of the Apple form factors being not good enough. Okay, so I don't expect them to be doing anything there. I do expect them to be doing a lot more with the voice. I'm surprised that the CarPlay didn't get any play at all. There was no CarPlay action. Okay, And maybe they're tired of talking about the Apple Car and denying the immersion or whatever is happening there, and so they didn't want to deal with it. I'm kind of annoyed that my brand new Prius doesn't have CarPlay. Apparently Toyota doesn't play nice with Apple. It's kind of annoying because it's a really nice car.
Where does CarPlay fit in? There's 4 platforms now, all uniformly named, Mac OS being renamed to align with the other 3. Where does CarPlay fit in? Which of the platforms does it fit in?
It's a remote to your iPhone.
So it's
a remote
iOS.
UI to your iPhone. So it's kind of like AirPlay except for cars, but it's got other characteristics. And I haven't looked into it at all, but it was totally missing.
Yeah, and it's really not open to developers. So like Android Auto, CarPlay very closed. Like Toyota, for instance, and Ford, they're now doing Smart Device Link, which actually opens it up to manufacturers and app developers and things. It's like open source.
Yeah, he's from GM, by the way, so he knows this stuff.
Yeah, and I just interviewed at Toyota too, so turned down the offer, but so.
I would say my daughter just bought a Jetta yesterday because it had CarPlay.
Friends of mine who I have a friend who wants to trade in his Range Rover for a Yukon or whatever because it has CarPlay.
Toyota's not doing Apple, are they? They turned it down. I thought.
Not that I know of.
Yeah. They're doing something on their own.
It's very depressing because they have a special wireless charger thing that I could throw my phone into the tray and it would charge it, except that it doesn't support this. I can get a case, but I tend to run commando, as you see. The only reason this has a bumper is that this phone slips out of my hand. Now it doesn't slip, so I don't worry about dropping it. But as you can see, these cup phones have edges. I don't drop them. So this is the big thing. If you're not dealing with the constraints in the adaptive interfaces, okay, this stuff was previewed at WWDC 2 years ago in preparation for OS 8 and the iPad multitasking, and now is totally all in because of the iPad Pro. I mean, in iPad Pro, these 2 modes are regular and regular, by the way. In other words, these have 2 iPad interfaces when it's on the Pro, as opposed to compact and regular, which it is on both of them right now. So in other words, you really on the iPad Pro can run 2 apps as iPad apps. It is really, if you haven't done that, go to the Apple Store, pull up two of the Apple apps and watch it do it. It is a phenomenal thing. So that to me is that if you're not doing that, there was a big push for that. Okay, so I guess we should also talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the great renaming, the grand renaming, I guess it's called. All right. How many people here have tried to take their Swift app to Swift 3? Okay. I tried it, and some of my code turned into infinite loops. It was awesome. Fortunately, I saw it before trying to execute. The Swift 3 is, because Swift has a namespacing mechanism, we're finally getting rid of NS this, NS that, all that stuff. It's all going away. The rest of the major foundation types, NS data in particular, but date and calendar and all these other sort of foundation data types that are wrappers around objects that provide some behavior, they're all becoming value types now, which means they support the var and the let form and all of that. And they fully toll-free bridge, and they do all that good stuff to Cocoa. But what that allows them to do is, of course, to let the compiler can now see inside these objects and can now do things. All right, you can now do generic extensions. You can do protocol extensions. You can do a whole bunch of stuff that Swift allows now that were very difficult. Remember that little section I talked about, the heterogeneous arrays that were annotations? Part of it is that those are NS objects using NS object protocol. But if I was doing all of that, if everything in that array was something implementing a pure Swift protocol, then Swift would have blown and gone with it. It wouldn't have had all of that BS, it would have just worked, right? So this transition to native struct types, value types, for all of these foundation types is a big win. It's a big win. In terms of performance, in terms of characteristics of behavior, letting you more carefully control writability so that you can exploit Grand Central Dispatch better, all of those things. So it's a lot of work. I took Spot Marks the Text, my Swift app, which is a hybrid Swift Objective-C app, and it's got probably 20K lines of Swift in it, and every file gets touched. Every file. There are no exceptions. And you look at that and you say, I'm going to wait till the 2 weeks before shipping. Well, you can't do that either. You can't do that either. It's not like the Swift 1.2 to Swift 2 switch, where really it was a dozen things that you had to deal with, right? In my case, going from Swift 1.2 to Swift 2, I had to pull back because I exposed a core data problem. Okay, most people didn't do stuff from core data like I do core data stuff. So they got it fixed, I moved to Swift 2, life is good, right? My expectation is Swift 3, try as they might, and they are trying really hard to make this easy, right? If you're an app like me that has everything as core data, I'm using all of the protocols, and I'm very aggressive at a bunch of this stuff, that I break things. So I know it's going to be trouble for me. So, but the fact that every file was touched means probably August 1st, I'm going to make my first run at it, right? Xcode 8b2 came out today, right? I'll probably see if they solve the infinite loop problem. If not, I need to file a bug report on it. Hopefully you won't have the big open canker that the grand renaming is going to be for me. It does appear to be straightforward. They really think that they've made the environment run very, very well in terms of doing the grand renaming. But I haven't done it. I mean, like I said, I looked at the stuff, my experience in the past having exposed problems. That gives me pause. So that said, everything they're doing in Swift is a big step forward. And if 2 years ago, if you told me that, they were going to have moved all of their foundation data types and all of these other things into a Swift native world, I would have said that was impossible. The fact that it has happened and is happening is an astonishing rate of speed. The fact that they also had the chutzpah to believe that they could do that and freeze the ABI with version 3 is I'm glad they pulled back from freezing the ABI. It's premature. What else would you like to know about the Swift stuff?
Questions? Not necessarily about the Swift stuff, but about how you get to the Swift stuff. Where do you read about the Swift changes? What Swift resources do you like to personally read from?
Oh, well, I get Natasha's newsletter, okay, and Jesse Squire's newsletter, okay. And Dave Verwer's stuff is good. I don't know if Erica's done her book yet. Has done a revised book. I'm sure she's working very hard on it. I'm an old guy, and I work very hard to make sure my code isn't tricky, even though it is ridiculously tricky. I really try to not be tricky about it. And so, I do very little with generics. My big use of Swift is that it's so much, has so much less syntactic noise, And then I can do a lot with protocols and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm very, very comfortable and happy with. So I'm not a good person to ask about, stupid Swift tricks and things like that. But I read all of these things because style matters. It's a mutating style. We all have to engage that. There's the Cocoa Coders group has bifurcated, and there's now a Swift group up there. And that's because Carl Brown has left AWS or Amazon and is now with IBM in the Swift team, and they've sponsored some stuff. So if you really wanted to be involved with, there is that competing meetup. They're not as cool as this meetup, okay. But they are focused on that pure Swift perspective. I don't know when the Swift one meets.
Tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, so so they moved it to Wednesday and then the coders is on Thursday. Okay. Anyway, thank you. So so what I would say is try earlier because there's so many files going to get touched, don't wait until 2 weeks ahead of time. But remember, you got to keep a branch of your old stuff around. So, you're in this mode of try it, back off, because it is a big change. If you need a group of people to huddle together, I can huddle with you. And we'll all suffer together, okay?
Can you deploy the Swift 3 apps on the older operating system, or do you have to have a runtime that's only going to be on that?
No, it goes all the way back to Swift iOS 8. Right now, for example, I answered this question on Stack Overflow yesterday. Some guy was trying to start with one of the new templates, and they won't go back because he selected the core data check mark, and there are new iOS 10 only APIs that simplify the whole setup of the core data stack. Now one call will set all of those pieces up that you used to have to make 3 classes and all of that stuff, right? So what I told him to do was that, use an Xcode 7 template and then let it do the auto migration, and then you'll run back as far as the OS 10, as far as the Xcode template will run back, and they run all the way back to 8 right now. They're not, because they're not trying to be ABI compliant, they basically, you take the library with you. They can go back a long time, and Andreas has always promised, the only promise they made about Swift is that your binaries would run. And which was an awesome promise, by the way, right? Yeah, pissed off a bunch of people, friends who are all ex-enterprise, or still enterprise people. What do you mean no source code compatibility? It's like, you can't evolve the source code if you say it has to be compatible. Back in my Java youth, it was always the battle between mission critical and cutting edge. People wanted both. You can't have both. Right? So I'm really glad that that Apple said just binary compatibility. If you're stepping on for the 1.0, you're here until we decide it's really fixed. And it was a brilliant thing. Because they turned out there were plenty of people who were willing to step up and engage it. Now it caused pain, but the language is a lot better because people were willing to pay that price. I know I am. I know I was glad I paid it. The fact that I could help make core data better on it because of the bugs I found. Very pleased. I also now have the direct ear of the architect of core data, so when I have a problem, I get it addressed. But that happens because of bugs, et cetera. Trying to fix those things.
Sir, well, so we'll probably use the remaining time to hang out and network, but I appreciate you sharing all your insight. If anyone has any more questions, I'm sure you'll hang out for a few minutes. And yeah, thanks for everything. Good to hear.
Hey, everyone, Gary for the second. I work with Carl at IBM. Starting to get more and more into the Swift and iOS stuff.
Yeah, Carl doesn't like all that.
Sorry, I got stuck.
I used to give up for 10%.
I really enjoyed that one.
But I didn't see on the description. I remember you told me. Are you gonna do another?
Maybe this one.
Without
You don't do any ads, or is there?
No.
Your phone is not for iPhone. You used to it, you left it. So you're gonna go back.
Some other developers.
It's like all over the place. It is, but Microsoft is slightly even cleaner now. Apple's still a little messy. Nokia is pretty clean too. No, I Microsoft not making anything.
So Python,
was all me. I mean, they just guys. Some of the old ones, and then they got a bunch of other.
Are you normal?
But I'd like to funded.
Okay. Yeah, we met the big machine learning.
It was a
The drivers should be
Actually, he emailed me about this talk today, or right off, and I read the description, it was all you, so I was like,
yeah, although I saw today.
Oh, yeah.
I got stuck at another one. Overall, did you enjoy it?
Well, I've gone 23 times. So it's really more of I've got so many friends.
Somebody with money
It's
right
And a lot of people, like the other mechanic shop is making a transition from Polish to it.
Well, like,
Are you Austin both?
Yeah, I mean, all my new work is done.
Are you any cross? No, you've always been.
I mean, I made a business. It's not a plan to
More business.
In this case, it is explicitly.
I understand it's getting into these graders cars.
Consulting about
iOS. Right, yeah, exactly. Oh, man.
Will this happen again next year when you do it?
I never think about that.
If I get the it's a full run.
Oh, it's not by prices very much.
Well, I wish they would, I wish they would put a Dutch option in the driver's because then,
I mean, everyone's like, what are your take? You still use it.
but it doesn't seem people definitely, they have a lot of people there who,
Independent.
it's very much that they have a lot of new people there. They have
You said you went last year.
But not 2 years out.
Okay, so there's a big gap because of that. Okay. But you'll be at one of these meetings. Okay.
Thanks, yeah.
That's great. I didn't want to block anyone.
Do you have any leads, Carl, about the soccer things?
Which requires-
Are they
Oh,
happening?
it's on Thursday, 2 p.m.
Is there a
It's a semi-final.
So, I mean,
Is there a weekend
but
one
you can't.
too?
Maybe, I don't know.
Depends on how they.
Yeah, so I've mainly been.
Right. So, and you'll be at the Thursday.
So I've been doing
Tomorrow
the
is
driver app, the
Wales
driver app, so
versus
it's.
Portugal. Man, I hope Wales makes it.
But you are going to watch Thursday.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean,
2 to 5. Is it?
They're not stinted. They're just not getting us a web view of when they're.
Yeah, we'll get the staging server.
So maybe next month, if we have something.
Yeah.
Because it has a.
You can think about it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that's
You're-
good.
Yeah, no, so
That's good.
so I've
That's
been
good.
doing
It's not-
this.
Yeah.
I've been
Do you have
pretty
any
much
cars
able
and
to
stuff?
build
I
it
do.
from
Okay.
the ground
They
up.
could
So,
make a
like,
web
doing
kit.
driver
Because I
app,
think there's
driver app.
Huh?
Because we have an Android guy.
No, I want to keep
the
it
drivers just
going.
gonna be on iPhone.
He's
So,
looking at your job.
I've
This
been
is Apple.
doing fun.
stuff.
So,
But
like,
I think Jack
So,
the
all
iPhone
iPhone
business model
like,
is
iPhone
back-end
Android.
stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
everything
I'm-
that touches iTunes is about
iPhone.
control of IP.
Yeah, so the main thing with on this one, most
He knows this, but you guys don't know.
Yeah,
Most people know me.
that like
My dad's
for it, but
I'm gonna be honest. I mean,
no, it's the way.
anything that sells
Honestly,
honestly, if it's Apple, it's Apple. If it's Android, it's Android. Personally, I just
it's like,
I like the $50 phones. I like it when Apple makes a standard, and then they do it at OEM level.
Yeah.
Well, like the things that I just been messing with it. But again, I'm trying to figure out why the Android will stop.
Getting in the way all the time.
And like
So much
help
fun.
is it's the same reason why Linux can't see people away from
I've been wanting to
Mac.
hear about Swift.
There's so many iterations, so many different denominations inside Linux, whereas Apple's like very canonical.
Yeah.
no,
The whole thing.
So keep that conversation going.
I didn't catch
so
it.
some people get around like real
Yeah, I'm a wave about it because I go on biohacking. I helped start biohacking pretty much.
then you're totally assistant.
Even just like,
There's
it seems like it now.
There's the one that needs a tech shop.
If you like, oh, okay, well, let me copy
Exactly.
this over here.
But you're always
I gotta
like,
change it here and then there.
Can't do it on the TV without, I mean, or rather,
Yeah.
You also run that one?
if you're,
Oh, it happens here.
if you've got the server that you're authenticating with,
I volunteered.
Well, we also run the Yellow.
you just run less calls.
Right.
Okay.
And
So
then
you guys connect, you know it exists. Okay.
Trade email address. If you're given jobs, you're looking for jobs.
What I'm doing is I'm collecting.
Standard
I
authentication.
sent people to IBM, so it doesn't hurt.
I used to work at IBM a long time ago.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out these problems.
Couldn't actually like talk to them
which are only
Facebook
4 or 5
and
people in the
they're
world.
like,
That's not
they just do
And
it.
so I'm busy collecting.
Maybe
I feel like, you know how Hollywood gets
That's
like
reasonable
for something big. I feel like programmers should have super
Yeah,
I don't like the whole turn everyone into a number in the .com. I don't like that.
So like,
you just don't have to.
No, recruiters get commission based on, again, like Indeed.com or Mastercard, just based on that.
And this
I
gets back to
believe
where
that I have to stay one step
Well, that's
ahead.
like even
So-
Because I did work on that
guy
for
that
IBM, like
kinds of
Deep
things that
Blue,
we
Blue
like
Jeans
just
before
does
it
like
became
that
Watson.
stuff.
Yeah.
He came over, was like,
So,
looking at my
yeah, I guess
I had
Terminator
all
inspired
the
me.
code.
It's like, I'm not against it, I just wanted us humans to not get lazy.
Yeah.
That's
So,
an art.
I'm okay with
This
Siri
big.
or Cortana or,
Yeah.
what's the Amazon one?
Alexa.
Alexa
So you
exists.
do like contract, you just haven't seen
They're only a small
have a contract with the
program.
company.
Or
Typically,
technology
it's
behind it.
super-
Yeah, not fully autonomous yet.
I used to work at Hire.com.
Right. They have a very, they won't tell you this, but you just watch what
Well, see what's gonna happen with LinkedIn now they got bought.
I'm having that conversation right now with Microsoft. He's Ryan, I mean, he's still Ryan, he's the new Microsoft.
And games, those are the only things that.
Well, how long has Jackrabbit been around?
4 or something.
Okay.
4 or 5 years. And did you guys start as a contract to hire or as, what's the?
Yeah, we do services,
have,
so
like,
we work with a whole bunch of technologies.
Okay.
We're like an agency.
Okay, so marketing for
Yeah.
most of your demographic.
A lot of
I've
startups
got
and a lot of other tech companies.
Right.
Okay.
I know a lot of like
He
big
has,
technologies
like,
coming up
his
versus
own
back
startup,
end.
things like that.
Did you guys know each other
Yeah,
before?
and
you
I was
started?
actually thinking
But it's
about
like,
it.
he's not gonna.
Oh,
I don't know, it just kinda seemed like he
yeah.
wanted me to
Connected through Vince.
hard.
Okay, but you guys have never, you only know each other through this, you haven't worked together.
So yeah,
I don't know, it's just
Or right
like.
off.
Everyone
You
has
guys
to
are,
all these
you're involved in
But
it. Okay, are you the specific company?
It's like, if there's something
Because
there,
I met
then
the
yeah.
guys that were interviewing.
there's a bunch of companies involved.
Yeah.
Oh, they interview right here.
Renaissance.
Last night I had a friend
Who's
over.
that?
No,
Is that
no, it's not the owners. They hired some people to like, you know how Uber has a orientation.
Oh, now I see what you mean.
Yeah.
They've got the ones for at the Highland Malls.
But it used to be at the Renaissance. I mean, not the Renaissance, the Crown Crown Plaza, 290 and 35.
Figure it out.
But you're saying there's minis. You're not.
There's companies involved, yeah.
Okay.
This is a big community project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel excited about any mobile or Apple gaming? That's always because I feel like we're gaming centric. So
Yeah.
like we were talking about hard drives in the country for a while.
Yeah. We've actually stayed away from gaming as the on like the
As a
whole
rule.
spectrum. Yeah.
As a rule.
You know
Okay.
what?
Gaming's usually like a different like beast in the.
It's hybrid because if you don't
High risk, high reward.
Yeah, you don't get the client, you just waste all that research.
Also, they usually use like a different framework, like usually the Unity game or something like that.
Well, that's your.
We stick more to like native stuff.
I mean, how
like
you don't have your level of success that makes you happy.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't doing other sides. I mean, I'd probably say.
So say your name.
Soccer.
But you're Meetup
just now.
I mean, on Meetup, you're signed up on Meetup.
I mean, some of
Yeah, feel free to. Here's an easier way.
Here's an easier way. I have
I use these Twitter apps.
Or
If you can use Twitter apps.
Yeah, no.
You know, Twitter is a hostile. It's kind of
Okay. Even better. Even better. I'm going to do my friend runs Hackaday.
One, I mean, for me, they have like this college.
If I just type
kind of
Google
arguing
Austin
around.
Meetup, vegan single, his name's Neil Tackett. Yeah, when I have a chance, I want to introduce a Neil.
The guy.
I'll give you his number, and it's so cool. I'm trying to find what you know,
Now he's
actually.
actually, yeah, but he's not doing
Did you do other
yeah,
guys
so I
here?
mean,
Yeah.
she connected job
Yeah, I mean, I am interested in
Oh, cool.
not because you had it right, and then by the time you got the app,
So it looks like
And I made this one app.
to do your operations before they're needed.
and I tried to solve it, because it kind of doesn't get fun. I tried to solve it that way.
Well, I bet you can get it now.
It's a stock market crash.
I mean, it needs to be updated. So it's like, oh yeah, it wasn't so much being an app developer. It's more like integrating card technology in 1 second. Go over here, but I mean, I also feel like with that
Time
I
to.
feel like that'd be
Just go build one of their
you
simple
know,
apps and
like
see
probably
what
go
goes. Don't even bother
much more than I do, you know.
What's your like goal?
My stuff is
Yeah, I think just.
I'm actually just telling you to just don't even waste time figuring out use guides and then validate whether it's worth your time. Because they haven't fixed the problem.
Like,
It's most time.
for me, like,
But the app changes.
and realize like,
To actually prove that it's fast. If it's not fast enough,
Yeah, they do it as a side job.
it's like they could
Why did you not take
I did my own app.
Because I do actually.
I had started coding before that, and then the whole music app and that's what I wanted to do. Was like, well, let me speak of my playlist. That was also that's how I got
Solve
into
the
it.
problem.
I'm not going to do it. And there was one where it was like, I'm not going to do like this stuff. I just want to talk about
That's all I
I just liked it.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, look for you at this. And it's good to meet you, Anthony. You too. Now I'm just a familiar face for everybody. That's all I know what the character is. And if you come back to this, you might be from my.
Well, you look like you're really paying attention, so
And then in the meantime, if you want to like channel your energy, for sure text Anil and be like you met me. And first of all, you can enter the hackathon. There's a $300,000 person. The Hackaday hackathon. This is a. I'll have you email you to. It's a chip company in the Bay Area that owns Hackaday, and he's the local Austin rep. And so we were at ATX Hackerspace, like presenting. But,
Dude, I know somebody who's done this. So
I'd love to.
oh really? Well, I'll bring him to the German match on Thursday. And if you're looking for more stuff, like we first watched the German meal, that's how Carl and I
This is all because you look like you're interested.
It's interesting. I'm freelancing
People
right
who
now.
look interested
So
in totally
one of the best things to do is
I like how you knew how much the fare was.
So if you want to get out of here,
You're like, I know it's exactly as much.
I know, right?
Like examples of where you
you always
want to
get
network
into
more
this
great, but I think I'm gonna walk
rebuilding
into that
friend
meetup at
relationships.
Yeah.
and then I'm gonna go to a deal at last year where the meetup was on. So that's kind of my plan. So I'm gonna see if Carl.
I've done a couple.
Are you
like,
walking?
I'm dinner.
Okay, I'll
Want to call it Mormon too?
yeah, I was going to do that. Do you want to talk on the way? Otherwise, I'll see you around.
Is there any like
It was
information?
basically,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I know, right? But basically, it's like it's YouTube, but it only has certain channels, right? It's just like, oh,
I mean, I'm happy to,
Mormon
I mean,
related,
those links,
so
I
it
just
kind of
Google
does
those
that.
links, and, you know,
Just
everyone has
especially like
access to
Mormon
the
culture, it's like
website.
you don't want to.
There's
There's kind of this like filter where you go.
Okay, yeah,
like,
so
there's a lot of things you don't really
I'll
want.
get those.
So kind of breaks it in one, but.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun,
Yeah,
but yeah, I
appreciate
mean,
you sharing everything. It's kind of
dabbling.
the
Wanna-
inside scoop of
It's I always
what
have a
WWDC
lot of
is
things
really
that I
like.
want to do. It's,
Yeah, I mean,
you
it's
know,
worth
trying to
going.
find the time to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
It's the hard part.
you know,
but-
for me, it's like I don't even go to the parties.
Yeah.
It's like, I always have a nice
What's your
dinner
name?
scheduled.
Yeah.
Michael? Dustin.
Anyway, thank you
Cool.
for hosting. I think I'm probably gonna end up speaking to you guys
You do
again
iOS
as I
development?
re-architect an office.
I'm trying to move into
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
I've done a lot
So
of
David and I will
stuff
be
of my
working
own,
on
and I
that
do
for-
have a good bit of experience with like
Cool.
Mac OS. Development. I'm like the fourth most contributor to this tool called Hammerspoon, which is
So
like
Jesse Squires, Erica Seven, SAD.
reasonably popular like OS automation app. It's like Automator, but doesn't suck. And it's also
Yeah.
a window manager, but it interfaces with like it's a Lua interface to like all the
It's a lot
OS
easier
X
to remember.
APIs, so you can write, have like a config file that'll do things like, oh, when I leave my home network,
Dave Verwer.
mute my volume, so when I open my,
Dave,
Yeah.
somewhere else,
VER.
it won't,
doesn't go
embarrass
off.
me. And that would be like 2 lines of code, for
Maybe
example,
we're
or you
gonna have
can
newsletters.
you can interface with the speech interface as it exists now. It's kind of a hack, but like, you can automate pretty much any aspect of it. So I mean, through that, I've gotten a lot of Cocoa experience and like it. So I'm trying to
Both are ones
get into that, and I've got a bunch of like unpublished personal, iOS apps that I've done over the years.
I know how that goes. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm like, start writing this, and I'm like, oh, I should do this other thing.
And I'm in the process right now. Like it's in review for this. But it's a Mac OS app, but it's a screen recording utility.
You're gonna make messages
Just
do all
because
that
it's
stuff for you?
I mean, it's not like you can do that in a QuickTime like app, but it's like really clunky to use, and it all runs in the store, or either too expensive or just like abandoned and crappy. And I basically just made like a global hotkey, like the screenshot hotkeys. It's basically that, and it'll put it on your desktop, like screen recording, date stamp, timestamp, and
So part of that is
super simple.
Yeah,
That's
cool.
all it's for.
That's I think especially with iOS, it's like kind of the key is to find like simple.
That's the biggest
thing.
Message opportunity. Yes.
Fantastic.
Self-deleting one, unless I can figure out how to make it so that the content is
just
no
like
longer visible. in the
and not that
message.
you
If I
can only
pull
do
that
one
off,
thing,
that'll
but
be
just like
So,
very
um,
simple. Like okay, this is
I've
like
got
the
a
point.
phone call I
of
gotta go
this.
to.
Yeah.
Seems odd, so why don't we do lunch?
See
I
how
was
it
gonna say,
goes,
you know,
but-
I was in
Yeah.
if I can take you out
So you
to
do
the
automotive
office.
stuff over, we'll do.
Yeah. So
So just email me your contact data unless you have a card now. Okay. Fix that.
I know.
Hurt
I know.
me.
I know. As soon as you said it, I was like, okay, it's happening. My final. I need to do it. I need to get one for myself.
When the old guy tells you to do it. But
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Welcome. And I look forward to hearing from you and let's do lunch.
Absolutely.
We can do coffee too if you prefer, but
No, it's coffee's for losers, I guess.
no, not at all. It's just that,
So there's no actual key. It's like your phone's actually the key.
I mean, coffee,
I'm doing some like shuttle stuff right now. So
Lunch seems to actually, for me, socially, seems to actually open people up more. Because, you make conversations about a bunch of different things, not just the technology stuff. If you're just doing coffee, you don't actually find out who the other person is, right? And I can tell you, I'm not trying to hire anybody. My design group was a group the first time I did it. This time it's me and my bride. It's a gardener and pop operation. It's going to stay that way. So I'm not actually going to lunch to actually hire anybody. I'm really just sort of like connecting, being engaged and meeting people, figuring things out.
the
You know,
I like the
shuttle
philosophy.
is still in development.
I never
And
thought
that
about
will
it
be
that way.
starting like on
Yeah.
Sam's campus,
I like it.
so it'll be
That's a good idea.
Well, I look forward to it.
Alright, sounds good, man.
Okay.
And thanks again.
All right, drop me an email.
Of course.
Do the thing.
A lot of it's. Hey, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Well, yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, so, I don't know, hopefully one day. We talked about doing some other projects in the past, I don't know.